Q school's hard, but I think the more that you do it, the more you realize you prepare for it the same as a regular event, even though you know that the consequence of playing well and not playing well are, different to a tournament. You don't play good in a tournament, you go to the next one. The next one, well, Q school, there really isn't a next one. It's like you either get through or you don't.
This is The Tournament Code.
We appreciate you taking the time to join us, Jamie. I know you personally. We know a little bit about your golf career, what you're up to right now, but before we start there and talk about that, let's really go back to the beginning. What got you into the game of golf in the first place?
My dad was a golf pro. Probably when I was about 7, he got the head professional job at Cronulla Golf Club. So it was kind of something I was always around as a kid. Like, most kids, I'm one of 4. So after school, we'd kind of go and hang out at the golf club. Even if we didn't play golf, we were kind of just like hanging out, running around the shop, ripping around on the golf buggies, just that was kind of our home, our second home. So that's kind of how I got into it. I was kind of always around it. Some people, they're practicing from 6 or 5, you hear these days, but I probably didn't get into it till I was about 11 or 12 years old. I started getting the bug to want to get better at it, but I was exposed to it from a very young age. And, I got 2 brothers and a sister, and they were both, they were all there as well. So it was one of those things, we all just did it. It was part of our, some people go to the gym with their parents and go play in the playroom, or we kind of were at the golf club hanging around, just around golf. And that's kind of how I got my start.
At what point did you get into playing tournaments, and what does the junior golf scene look like in Australia?
So I got into it, like the junior tournaments I got into were, I wasn't very good. I was probably still off a 36 handicap when I was 14. So I wasn't good. I practiced so hard and I didn't get better, but I had a free coach. So the avenues in Australia are a little similar to here. So you have it's called the Jack Newton Junior Golf Foundation. They host events in the summer during your school holidays that you would play. And if you get good into those and do well, you can get picked into some teams to represent your state. But I never got in any of that because I was shooting 120 most times I was going out. I think my first round I recorded at Cronulla when I was 12 was 148. I still remember it like yesterday. So that's kind of the avenue I got into. When I got to about 16, I was starting to get good. So every club kind of has a weekend tournament once a year where they have their cup event. So it might be the Cronulla Cup, 18 holes, or the Lakes Medal might be a 36-hole event. So I started playing in those, started winning those, which was good. And I kind of went from 15 to 18. The trajectory was quite steep on the up, which was good. And, I got my handicap down pretty low. I started winning a lot of that stuff. And then it kind of just snowballed into, I played in our state team, and the state team was great. So from that, we'd get sent around the country, and then I got picked in the Australian team, and it kind of just kept morphing from there to the Australian Institute of Sport. And then, before you knew it, in a space of, probably 3 or 4 years, you're probably traveling 6 months of the year between Australia and New Zealand, and then the US and UK. And it was a pretty, cool experience. But my junior career comparative to a lot of my friends that I've played on tour with is probably very different.
So when you traveled to the US with the Australian national team, what tournaments did you guys compete in, and how were those courses set up differently, and just how were the tournaments different overall from those in Australia?
So the first ever tournament I played in the US was the Sunnyhanna Amateur, which is up in the northeast, one of the, I didn't know at the time, but obviously one of the bigger events. And I remember the funniest thing was the greens were so fast, but they were soft. And in Australia, it's kind of the opposite. When you play on really quick greens, they're like concrete. So most of the time, if you've got 160 to a pin, you're probably landing at 150 and it's taken one big bounce and stopping. Where at Sunnyhanna, I remember, you could fly it up to the pin and it would stop, but the greens were lightning quick. So that was like the first thing I remember that was like completely different to Australian golf. And then probably the next thing was the rough. I'd never seen rough that green and that thick, because our course is more tree line. We don't have a lot of rough under the trees, I suppose. But it was just different grasses and it was just very lush and thick. Yeah, so that was my first ever tournament over in the States over here. And, you're starting to play with kids that you see their names a lot. I actually got beaten a playoff that week. It was my first ever event here, and I remember I bogeyed 17 every single day, and even in the playoff. And I got beat by Michael Sim, and also Nick Thompson was in the playoff. And I remember I was like so happy, like I played really nicely, and I remember calling my dad and going like, this is where I want to be playing golf. Like that was the first thing I said to him. I was like, it's such a good time. And from there, I started getting invites into a lot of other events like the Northeastern, Monroe, like tournaments that I wasn't in. I played with a guy named Duke Delger, who was from South Carolina. He run the Players Amateur. So I played with him 2 days, and he kind of said to me, hey, any tournaments you want to get in, let me know, and I'll call the tournament director. Just as I suppose as a bit of credibility, like, hey, I've played with this, guy. He's got a good game, and he's not just taking a spot up in the field, he's competitive. So that was my first event, and over here we kind of rolled into, I played the Southeastern down in Columbus, Georgia, because again, it was my first time here. I was just playing what I got into. I think I had a pretty decent week there. I had a top 10. I think I finished 7th, which was a good start. Then we played the Dogwood Invitational at Druid Hills Golf Club, and then you kind of rolled into the Rice Planters in Charleston, South Carolina, which was like probably still one of the funnest weeks because, for us being Australia, it was like on a beach. It was very laid back. I mean, it definitely wasn't like an awesome golf course, but it was a really fun experience just because you had the water. I stayed with a really cool family that had like this outdoor shower that was like awesome. And then we'd play like the Porter Cup, the Western, then the USM. And that was kind of our summer loop over here.
How did you prepare for tournaments? Like, coming over beforehand, how did you prepare? And then once you were here, what did you do to get yourself ready? Because that's a tough stretch to play that many tournaments in succession, especially being away from home.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Preparation-wise, really nothing different. Like my golf club I grew up at was a private club, but we had no range, small putting green. So you're literally hitting balls up the fairway in between groups. And like you could have 150 balls out there and you're trying to fish your golf ball out of, amongst all of mine, which is crazy when you come over here and you see, you just wouldn't happen over here. So practice-wise is usually we'd hit balls very early or late, and then, we did a lot of stuff that we weren't supposed to. We were breaking the law, but not really. We'd go to like local schools and hit balls on their ovals. So Cronulla High School was down the street, so we used to, during school, I'd go and hit golf balls on their field, and just if it was PE on, I'd hit down the other way, so I was hitting away from them. But they started building big fences around the schools to kind of stop that, and then, we always had a way to get in or park your car closer so you could at least hop over and hit balls, and then you'd kind of work out later how to get out. So that was no different. Coming here, the biggest learning curve was I'd never played as many events in a row. So I remember getting to the Porter Cup, and I don't know how many weeks in a row I'd played, but it might have been 7 or 8 weeks in a row. I was lost. I couldn't hit, literally couldn't hit a cow on the backside from 3 feet in front of me. I just didn't know where the ball was going. And when I got back to Australia eventually, I kind of realized I can't play every single week, like 7, 8, 9 weeks and try to compete at a high level. And the biggest thing too is like a kid from Australia, from a little golf course with no driving range, and you start going to these tournaments with, 100-yard wide ranges with unlimited Pro Vs, phenomenal chipping greens, short game. I was like trying to pack in a year's worth of practice in, 5-week stretch, because I'm like, I could hit wedge, like hitting wedges to a green is unheard of. Like in Australia, if you get caught hitting more than 2 or 3 balls, like it was a letter to you at home, and, you'd probably get a talking to by the board. And here you've got wedge greens, so I probably over practiced, and then how golf is. You get the ebbs and flows. Like you have it, and then you don't have it, and then if I didn't have it, I was a hard worker, so I didn't mind hitting balls and unlimited Pro Vs and thing. And then you're kind of doing more harm than good looking back, because sometimes you're probably better off to step away and go, you know what, I'm not gonna grind. I'm gonna think about what's going on, think about it logically, and then tomorrow when I get to the course, on my practice day, my goals are to do X, Y, Z, and that's my goal. I'm gonna only hit 100 balls or whatever, and I'm gonna play. I'm not gonna spend play 18 holes and hit 3 or 4 pyramids after it, and then putt and then chip, and so on and so on.
Absolutely. You mentioned you're a hard worker, and earlier you said, I was a 36 handicap at the age of 14 and was working hard, just it wasn't happening. Then all of a sudden you had this almost meteoric rise as far as like improvement in golf ability over the span of 4 years. What do you credit that growth and improvement to?
I always worked really hard, because I wouldn't say that I was like naturally talented. I mean, I had great hand-eye coordination and I worked really hard, but I don't know, just for some reason, I was always a little later than people my age, but I just kept working really hard. And I don't know, I guess it just, once I started getting it, I got it, and I just kept going and going. But I always worked just as hard, and I guess it just kind of eventually the light bulb went off, and you start winning some events, and you keep winning and doing well, and then before you know it, your trajectories change, your schedule changes, your opportunities, you have more opportunities to compete in other events. So I think it was just a matter of me working it out, which I couldn't exactly tell you what was better or what was worse. It was just a gradual progression, but once I got it, I just got really hot for probably, honestly, for 3 or 4 years there. I got, as an amateur, I won a lot of tournaments and, did well, traveled well with my game as well. It wasn't like just local stuff that I played good at my local club. Like I was traveling, playing a lot of events, and we weren't winning. I was having, good finishes. So it was just, I don't know. It's hard to put your finger on it, but it just, just worked out.
Do you remember a specific like low round or tournament that you won where you're like, you can look back and you're like, this is the point that light bulb went off, I started to get it?
I remember the Australian Amateur, I played really well one year, but I didn't win. But next week there was a tournament in Canberra. I think it was the ACT Amateur. It was a 4-round tournament at Royal Canberra Golf Club, and I won that week. And I remember telling everyone, like, you're telling your dad at home, like, hey dad, I'm playing good, I'm just it's just not clicking for me or whatever. And he'd always be like, well, just be patient, your week will come. And then I remember winning that, and that was a good, even though I was a week late, because obviously you want to win the Australian Amateur, it's like, our biggest amateur event in Australia. I was like, that's, kind of gave me, just filled the tank up and put more fuel on the fire, so to speak, where I knew I could do it, and I was motivated to, keep traveling and playing events. So that was probably the first event that 4-round tournament that I won, that I was really like, okay, I've won a lot of 1-day events and 2-day events, but now is the time to, I won that, and I kind of had the belief, like, okay, if I can do this, I can beat all these guys that I was playing.
Absolutely. So you played on the Australian national team, you traveled over to the US, you say to your dad, hey, this is where I want to be. You have a nice little stretch of tournaments. What happens after that in your career? What do you decide to do, and how do you progress?
So I came over to the US 3 years in a row, did that amateur circuit, and the reason I probably didn't turn pro earlier was because I was taking advantage of our system we have in Australia. Because, like, if you turn pro, now you got to pay for everything yourself, which all I've done is play golf. So I don't have like a big bankroll in my bank. It's like all I've done is play golf, and it's, all been paid for because I worked, and it was kind of the compensation for me working hard at my game was they will send me away to play and travel. So I played 3 years over here, and then when I just finally decided to turn pro, I guess it was in 2008, I got some sponsors invites into some events, but it was almost like junior golf starting all over again. So you're at a pinnacle of my amateur career, I suppose. Like, we had a lot of great amateurs. We had Michael Sam, Wonjun Lee, Andrew Tampion, Ashley Hall. I mean, there was a bunch of really, really great players. And then I turned pro, and then you start at the bottom again. So now you go on to golf courses you haven't ever played, and you're playing with a bunch of people that don't give a rat's who you are, what you've done. You're basically, you eat what you kill. So that was probably it was almost like playing, to a certain degree, like club golf for me at the start, because it was like, okay, and I played solid when I first turned pro. Like, I was making cuts, playing some good events, but it was a big eye-opener because it was a lot different to amateur golf. It was, people didn't care. There was a lot of guys that were beating me that I thought that, there's no way this guy's going to beat me, but they were so good about knowing what shots to hit when. If they weren't playing good, know how to get it around and shoot par, where I was still young and you're hitting shots that you think you could hit, but you probably shouldn't hit it. And if I wasn't playing well, I couldn't manage my game as well as a lot of these guys that have been doing it for a job. That's I turned pro in 08. 09, I went to, I had a friend, Aaron Price, who played on the PGA Tour over here. He's actually just started a podcast as well. So Aaron was on the PGA Tour. He was a junior at my club when I was there, and he had a house in Jacksonville Beach. He said, "Hey man, if you want to come over and do Q school," he goes, "you're more than welcome to stay at my house and practice at TPC Sawgrass." And I'm like, hell yeah, I'm in. So I flew over here, and I got through first, second, made it all the way to finals in 09. And that was probably a big aha, because I was at final stage of Q school at Bear Lakes down in Florida, and I played my practice rounds with Ricky Fowler, because he was actually doing some of the Monday qualifiers in 09, and his caddy Joe Scovrin at the time was sleeping in our hotel rooms, and a few of my other friends that were caddying, so we kind of all knew each other. But it was just surreal, because I remember Todd Hamilton, British Open winner, David Duval. There was just so many people that I'd seen their names on TV from Australia as a kid on the PGA Tour that I'd never had played golf with, and it was kind of just like a real eye-opening thing. Like, I remember I played with Jesper Parnevik for a round. I think I played the first 2 rounds or last 2 rounds with Cameron Tringali. I remember one of the practice rounds, I'm trying to think of his name, Josh Broadway. He's there, he said, "Hey, can I play through?" And I'll never forget, cross-handed grip on this par 3 and just flushes it. And I thought he was like joking, and then now the guy's like, "No, he plays cross-handed." So I had status. I remember the first round was super windy. I think I shot, it was either high 70s or might have even been 80. But I had a stretch where it was like super windy, and I had might have been 6 over through 9. And I remember I didn't shoot another round over par. I think I shot par or better the next 5 rounds, because it used to be 6 rounds then. So I finished around 100th. So it gave me status. I got a few starts, and that's kind of how I got to the United States and started playing golf here. But I didn't do any good that year, and really from 2010 to 2016, I was just playing in Australia. Like, I was playing, Vanuatu Open, Samoa. Anywhere where I could go to make money, I was kind of going there and playing. And yeah, I got full status in 2016 for the Korn Ferry Tour here, which was good. Because I played China Tour for 3 years. I played One Asia. Basically just was in Asia for the 5 years on and off, trying to cut my teeth and make it back over here.
What did you learn playing in those overseas events, in China, etc., and then coming back over here and playing over here. Like, tell us a little bit about the differences and everything you learned along the way, because I know that grinding on the tour like that, not making a lot of money, not having like a heavy bankroll behind you or anything like that, like it can be a hard life.
Yeah, Asia was fun because I had a lot of friends, like had a lot of friends my age that I grew up in Australia that were playing there. So it wasn't lonely. It was a lot of fun, but obviously just culturally it's so different. Like, I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, so there's some weeks that are a lot more fun off the golf course than other weeks. But probably the biggest thing is like golf courses are in nowhere near a condition that we have over here. They got different grasses. They don't have the budgets like they do here. Food can be very challenging, especially like in China. You pretty much eat for breakfast what you ate for dinner the night before. That's that's their cult. That's what I'm saying. It was just culturally different. And then it was just super hot, humid, hot, but it was a lot of fun. But I learned that, I didn't want to be doing that forever. I remember someone telling me that there was a lot of guys that go to Asia and kind of get stuck there. Because I remember speaking to a few guys from Australia that were in the US and they had status in Asia and didn't go. And they said, listen, we could go to Asia and have a nice life, but a lot of people get stuck there. And if you look back at the books over the years, there's been a lot of great Australian players, for instance, that have been able to play really well up in Asia, and they kind of get not stuck, but comfortable there because you can live quite cheaply. If you live in, say, like Thailand, like Black Mountain does a membership for a lot of pros. So you can live cheaply, eat great food, have great practice facilities, but, ultimately the goal is to be playing with the best players in the world, and that's, obviously going to be either in the US or Europe or Japan, so that's where you're trying to get to.
So when you got back to the Korn Ferry in 2016, did you get there from your finish on the China money list, or did you go back to Q school and get through that way?
So I actually got through, I think I was like one of 7 or 8 guys that made it from first stage all the way through to finals. So that's how I got my Korn Ferry status. I got through Q school, and then I had to go back. I think it was 2018. I finished like 80. I think I was in the final event. I was like 73rd, and I missed the cut. And I finished like 80th or something like that. So I went back to Q school, regained my status, and then I had full status until I lost it in 2021, at the end of 2021.
What did you learn going back to Q school that next time, and making it all the way through in that 2016 time, and then going back again later? What sort of things did you learn along the way?
That's a good question. I probably, you just learn a lot over your career, like how to dealing with emotions and pressure. I think that Q school is just so hard. Like, not hard as in, it's as hard as you make it, but it's just hard because the numbers don't work for you. Like, there's so many guys that never make it out there or spend a long time trying to get their card, and then they get it and get to the PGA Tour, because it's just one of those weeks that if you just have a bad round, and not even a bad round, you just have a bad hole, and have a double or a triple, I mean, you can blow yourself out of the water, and you got to wait around for another 12 months. And you got to do that 3 times, which is super tough. And there's no stage that's easier than another stage, but it's just hard because the numbers don't stack towards you. There's so many good guys. I mean, I remember doing Monday qualifiers, with Brian Harmon. I mean, Brian couldn't make it through Q school, and he was like a US junior champion, super good guy, great player. But, he missed, I don't know how many years in a row, 2-3 years in a row. I mean, and obviously he's had a great career, won, and he's one of these guys that's going to be out there as long as he wants to pursue it. But, there's so many guys like him, and then you hear stories of, guys like Freddie Copley. I mean, there's so many guys that went to Q school like a bunch of times, Chris DeMarco's, like over the years, and it's just, Q school's hard, but I think the more that you do it, the more you realize, like, okay, this is just another week, it's another tournament, and you prepare for it. You prepare for it the same as a regular event, even though you know that the consequence of playing well and not playing well are, different to a tournament. You don't play good in a tournament, you go to the next one. The next one, well, Q school, there really isn't a next one. It's like you either get through or you don't. But I suppose the biggest thing is level heads prevail, because there's a lot, Q school's a week where you don't need to be a hero. You just go and shoot 2 or 3 under a day. For most, if you look at all the courses over the years, if you shoot 1 under a 9, you pretty much would make it through. Now, the last few years, the courses have changed and players have gotten a lot better, so it's probably not 2 under a day is going to get you through. You probably need to be at 12, but if you look at it and go, okay, if I shoot 2 under on the front, 1 under on the back, and I do that 4 days in a row, 12 under is probably going to make it through every single stage, which is completely attainable.
Over that time, you got, as you said, you got that status in 2016. You got out there, and then you got back, and then you had conditional status and got back on again. Tell us a little bit about what it was like finally having that status in 2016 and playing the full series of events.
It was awesome. The coolest thing was just being guaranteed events. So I remember you get guaranteed the first 8 events. I remember I'd missed my first 4 cuts in a row to start with, and I wasn't, I was like, geez, man, like, here we go again, I've got my card, and you start feeling the pressure of, okay, I got to perform. And I remember I was not hitting my irons that great, so I ended up changing irons, which is something I'd never done. I hit a Mizuno demo club down at Druid Hills. I was hitting it high, and the pro was like, hey, why don't you try this shaft? It was a KBS 130X, and I was like, yes, we'll try it. So I hit balls. It was in a 6 iron. And I remember looking on the TrackMan, and my spread pattern was like, like this. And then with my Titleist irons, it was, way bigger. So I rang the Mizuno rep, because they were like in Georgia here. And he was like, yeah, I'll build you a set. You can pick them up tomorrow. So I picked them up, and I flew straight from there to Corrales, where they're playing this week in the Dominican Republic, and I think I had played really well. I think I finished if I didn't top 10, I finished just outside the top 10, and kind of had a good week there, which gave me status for the rest of the year. And I suppose, to answer your question, just knowing your schedule is really big, and then just learning how to manage your schedule too, like what weeks you're going to play and what you're not. And probably earlier in my career, when I talk about like 2018, when you're not, you set out a schedule and you go, okay, I'm going to play, these 3 events. And then if you miss the 3 cuts and you're going to have the 4th week off, well, then you end up going, well, I'm going to play the 4th because I've missed the 3 cuts, right? And then you miss the 4th, and you just keep pushing. So the biggest thing, I suppose, when I started playing better was being disciplined in what events I'm going to play, and making a plan and sticking to the plan. Because when I started going through it with my coach, he looked at my schedule and he goes, okay, it's pretty simple to see what events you play good in. He's like, you make all your money in 7 or 8 events. And you start looking at it and you're like, yeah, I always play really good in Greenville, South Carolina. I've really played good in Columbus, Ohio. I play good at, Nashville. I play really well. So you start cherry picking the events you want to play, and you got to obviously back yourself. But previous to this year on the PGA Tour, I mean, most of the guys in the top 10 to top 20, they might play 15 events in the majors because they just cherry pick the ones that they want to play. And it's not because they don't want to play the other ones. It's just some courses you don't play good. Like my coach will say, like, I remember Bogota. I'd missed the cut 4 years in a row in Bogota, and I said to my coach, I was like, I love Bogota. He's like, why do you like Bogota? He goes, you miss the cut, you just waste your money every time you go there. He goes, for whatever reason, you don't like the golf course, it doesn't suit your eye. was like, no, I want to play Bogota. I love the week. It's a great week. And I remember in 2020, I guess it was right before COVID, I think I finished 12th there. And I remember feeling so good because I was like, told ya. But historically, I didn't play good. So you kind of look at even anybody's career you pull up on the PGA Tour. I mean, there's weeks that guys play really. I mean, this week in Corrales, Ben Martin last year had a chance to win. He missed that putt 18. I saw he had a top 10 or just around the top 10. There's guys that play good at the same courses every single year because those courses suit their eye, and for whatever reason, they feel comfortable on it. And that's probably the biggest thing, is learning, okay, what events am I going to play? Which ones do I like? Which ones don't I do as well in? And trying to work out, is it, why do I not do good in it? Is it because it's a 5th event in a row? Is it because I don't really like the layout? I don't like the grass? Working all that stuff out is just trial and error. But that was probably the biggest thing. I'll say early in my career, I played a lot of events in a row, and then towards the end was being disciplined about, okay, here are the events that I played good in. They're my priority. What am I going to play leading up to those events? Like, do I want it to be the first event of my next run, or do I want it to be if I play 3 in a row, do I want Savannah to be my 3rd event, or do I want it to be my 2nd event? So you kind of pick those events and then build your schedule around it and go from there.
That's beautiful. It sounds like you got like really good at that over time, and nobody would be good at that at first. But that's something that's common for all of the Korn Ferry Tour players that we've had on the podcast. They've always mentioned how hard it is to take weeks off and how necessary it is. When you do take a week off, what does that week off look like?
So for me, my coach was in Hilton Head, South Carolina. So for me, my week off was, I'd pretty much get home on Monday. I'd either spend Monday at home with the family, and then I would jet off to South Carolina for 2 days. I'd spend 2 days with my coach, come back, and then, I'd be practicing or working on whatever my coach has given me. And then at the same time, I'm trying to do stuff with my family and, cut my grass and do all the stuff around the house that's gone to shit since I've been gone. So that was, even, to be honest, like something that's probably underrated too, is like, remember we bought our house in 2016. I mean, just having a house added another complete layer. We bought a house. My son was born in 2016. So you start, your life changes, like your priorities. Like when I was 21, when I got home, I mean, I didn't have to do any stuff around the house. I just go to the golf course every day. And I suppose as life goes on, you've got blocks of time. And as you get older, your time starts getting taken because, you got to pick your kid up from school. You got to go to a soccer game, or you got to cut the grass, or you got to go do something with your wife's friends. So managing those weeks off was a juggling act, because my priority was, I got to see my coach. That's my absolute number one priority. My other priority is, obviously, I got to see my family, and I got to try to rewind and recharge. But the weeks off were probably more harder than a tournament week, because I'm changing stuff, I'm working really hard. But seeing my coach gave me a lot of energy. Like, okay, if I put the pedal down, I know that the direction is going to be this way, because before I felt like I was going this way or even downhill. So my week off was see my coach, know where I'm at with my game, what I got to work on, spend time with my wife and son, get stuff done around the house, kind of go to the pool, do whatever it is, hang out. And then when I get to the next tournament, okay, I'm going to practice, set some time away to practice and work on the stuff. And then, off we go again for another spell. And it was kind of rinse and repeat for, 18 to 20 something events. I played three to 4 in a row, and then I'd do that kind of over and over.
Who was your coach, and how did you get connected to him?
I was seeing Colin Swatton, who you obviously know, he was Jason Day's coach and caddy for the longest time. So kind of when they split, I wanted to see him when I first came over, and he was really good. He just said, listen, to do this correctly, I don't have the time because I'm away too much. So I kind of just worked with the local guy, Jeff Nelson, who's down at Sea Island at my club. He was awesome. We'd just get in the TrackMan and hit balls, and he'd keep me very accountable, and we'd practice a lot together, which was fun. But Cole was probably a big notch up in just everything from coaching to biomechanics to setting a schedule to how to walk a golf course, what to look for in your practice rounds, how to schedule your week, how to pick tournaments. So he was great. And then obviously, so when him and Jason went from just, instead of being coach caddy to just coach, I started ringing him again. And he was like, shit, man. He goes, if you're this persistent, if you practice half as much as you annoy me on the phone for me to give you a lesson, he goes, I'm going to see you. So, we kind of started seeing each other, and it was a fun, a really fun relationship, and good, it was a great learning experience for me. And then, we just went from probably mediocre to, he got my game to probably the best it ever had been. From there, I suppose COVID happened, and, it's kind of a bit of a, the last 3 years, or 2 years, probably been a bit of a blur, to be honest, because I went from, almost having my PGA Tour card in 2019 to back on the Korn Ferry Tour, and then COVID hit, and, you get stuck at home for 6 months, and, I kind of enjoyed, it was the first time that I actually got to sit at home probably since I was about 16, and I was like, man, this is pretty nice, like, sitting, sleeping in your own bed and having dinner. And, I wasn't playing as well when I went back after COVID. And then after I lost my card, it was kind of like, what the hell happened?
I get that. Before we kind of get to what did happen, let's talk a little bit more about your coach. You said, hey, you step up in biomechanics, step up as far as like kind of knowing what to do out there. What are some specific things that you learned from him about your swing or about golf in general?
I learned so much. I mean, pretty much from the ground up, just being able to just literally everything, like keeping statistics, having less variables, practicing with more of a purpose, like using alignment sticks, having mirrors down, like just checking all the little things that you can check. Like he would always say to me, like this mirror and this T-square, they're my eyes when I'm not here for you. Like, so when you're on the road, he goes, I don't want you to come back and, your feet are aiming left and your shoulders are aiming right. Or, so it was like when we worked together, I didn't want to spend a day of like going over the stuff that we were doing the month before. Like he was like, okay, your alignment's great. We were working on your hips, shoulders, they look great. So that was a real big thing, is just, knowing what to practice, when to practice, managing my schedule, and just knowing, having a guy that got someone a number and the one in the world. It wasn't like, oh, I hope he knows what he's doing. Like he knew what he was doing. He was, I still believe he's probably the best coach in the world that I've been around. And he's just got a system, and he's like, if you want to get from where you are to here, this is how many hours you got to do. Practice wise, this is how much you need to see me, and honestly, it was just it starts becoming a financial thing, because it's like, the more time you want to spend with them, the more money it costs. And it was just juggling how much money I'm earning to how much money I can afford to pay my coach. And that's kind of it, with him. It was just, He did everything great, and then even caddying, like having my caddies go there and saying to the caddy, well, how do you walk the golf course? And the caddy's like, well, I walk around. He's like, well, what about that bunker there? And he's like, well, what about it? He's like, hey, well, have you been in the bunker? No. And he had tons of information, he'd rate like a bunker from 1 to 3, like, 1 is, it's fine. 2, it's kind of 50-50. 3, it's absolutely dead. So like I'd get on a hole and I'd go, okay, I'm going to hit 2 on here. He's like, well, why don't you hit driver? And I'm like, well, there's a bunker there. He's like, well, have you been in the bunker? I was like, no. He's like, well, go have a look at it. So we go up there, and he's like, the first question you got to ask yourself, is the penalty a penalty? So when I hit in that bunker, it's like, let's just say you do hit in the bunker. If the penalty is not a penalty, why not take on that risk? But if it's something that's going to be absolutely dead, absolutely. So like that was probably a real big thing too, just like learning how to play a golf course and how to attack it, and having a strategy and having a caddy that can sit there and go, okay, here's 2 iron. And I'm like, no, I want to hit 3-wood or driver. No, we said it's 2 iron. We've got to hit it 245 down here. Here's your 2 iron, and walking away. So the coaching side was phenomenal, but I suppose the course management caddy side of it was next level, because you've got a guy that, you know, was out there with the number 1 player in the world winning. Yeah, they won 20 times worldwide, you know, won a major, and he's, you know, friends with Tiger, you know, Jordan Spieth, like all the best of the best, walking around with their caddies. I mean, he just knew how to play the golf course. So it was just always a matter of, you know, I was like a race car. He's always just trying to tune you up and going, okay, it's like a game of chess. You just got to be one step ahead of the golf course, like a game of chess. And, you know, you want to go from here to here, from here to here, where to hit on the greens. And that was really it. It was literally just like a game. So it was just a matter of, if I was hitting it really well, you know, like he even said, even like when Dustin Johnson and Jordan were dueling it out, you know, he's like, look, Dustin Johnson is way more talented than Jordan Spieth is. However, he goes, Jordan Spieth outplays him because he knows, like, you know, if they both hit it to 15 feet, well, Jordan's going to have an uphill putt and Dustin might have a right to lefter or a downhill, and you can attack that uphill a lot more than a downhill putt. So it was a lot of like where the pins are, you know, where do you want to be to that pin? So if you're in between clubs and shorts and uphill, well, you take the shorter club. And that was the biggest eye opener, was just like, hey, when we get to a golf course, you know, like what's going to win this week? And I was like, well, I don't know. Well, that wasn't good enough. So he'd send me a sheet. 15 under is going to be the winning score this week. You know, he'd average it out over the last 5 years or 10 years that tournaments played, which is a lot harder on the Korn Ferry Tour because those tournaments change. But on the PGA Tour, you know, basically there's so much data, and he's basically like a bookmaker. You can just go, okay, what data? I'm going to extract all this data. The winning score is going to be 15 under. You know, you got to play the par 3s and par 5s in 8 under, the par 4s and, you know, 5 under, and the par 3s in 2 under. Here's the top hard, the 9 easiest holes. Here's the 9 hardest holes, and then you build a strategy around. So you go, okay, well, enough they play the par 5s in 8 under. You got to be aggressive with the par 5s. So you know that you're going to be aggressive. The par 3s are a low score. Okay, I'm going to give the par 3s a little bit more respect. Par 4s, the par 4s. That was probably the biggest, you know, apart from how phenomenal he was with the golf swing, just learning how to have a goal. So when you walk around the golf course, you're starting to think about, okay, I know I'm going to play the par 5s good this week. Par 3s are going to play, you know, hard. Why are they hard? You know, learning, you know, where the pins are going to be, where do I want to hit it to each pin. That was just information that was absolutely priceless, because, you know, it's not every day that you have access. Anybody has access to that type of information. And when they explain it to you and you see what they've won and how they've done it, you listen. So it was almost like he said, he's like, look, I'm like Vegas. He goes, the house always wins. And he goes, I'm the house, you know, so this is what the winning score is. And, you know, it's true, you know, like on the PGA Tour, the formula is 19 and 5, you know, 19 birdies, 5 bogeys. Most weeks you shoot 14 under, you're going to win on the PGA Tour. It's the guy that has the least amount of mistakes. So once you get to a level that you can hit the ball really well and you've got everything going, then it starts becoming a putting comp. But even to more than a putting comp, it becomes to a strategy, like where am I hitting it to the greens, to that pin? Do I want to be short of it? Do I want to be to the right of it? Do I want to hit it past that? So it's like a whole new game. You got to learn again. Like it's like, okay, I'm a really good golfer, but now I got to learn how to play the golf course the correct way. So that was a massive learning thing, because I felt like I had to learn how to play golf again.
Absolutely. That is really cool insight to kind of learn that and see how, what things look like from his perspective. One other thing that I thought was interesting that you mentioned earlier was your irons. You had those tireless irons, and they had a massive dispersion pattern, and you switched over to the Mizunos, and they had a much smaller dispersion pattern. Tell us about your process as far as getting clubs, working with clubs, getting fit for clubs, etc., and what you've learned along the way with that. Because, when you're an amateur, you don't get things for free. It's a little bit harder. You don't maybe have necessarily the resources. And even at the Korn Ferry level, like, guys are not necessarily going to be in the perfect fit for them. Like, things just happen, and players have control of what goes in their bag, and they could make bad decisions and good decisions on that front. But for you, what have you learned along the way as far as getting the right equipment, figuring out what works best for you, and the best ways to evaluate what equipment is going to work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's probably a couple parts to that question. The first part with me, I don't change very often. So, like, I'm still using a driver from two models ago because I hit it really well. I think, well, if it's just because it's shiny, it doesn't mean it's going to be any better. So I'm not one to change. When I do, you got to make sure that you're testing with, like, for instance, on the Korn Ferry Tour, you get a new driver comes out, and the TaylorMade rep comes out, hey, you need to try this driver. And, on the range, you've got Titleist Pro VXs. Well, I use a Pro V, a left dot Pro V. So it's a completely different golf ball. So they fit you with a Titleist Pro VX. It's a complete wrong. It's like going out on a racetrack and fitting you for, a certain tire or suspension, but, the track that you're going to race on is completely different. And so I always do all my testing off the golf course in an environment that I've controlled. I use my own golf balls. Once I've got it all dialed in, I know I've used it. So I've used pretty much the same equipment for the most part. So my professional career from 16 on is the same. Now the tricky thing is you get a lot of kids, and you're going to have them come on this podcast, is you go from not having to pay for equipment to, all the equipment companies around the Korn Ferry Tour, they'll give you whatever you want to use. Every single week there's a new putter company, there's a new grip company, there's a new whatever. And the biggest thing is they try to own you, because they go, hey man, we'll give you X amount of dollars for a Titleist contract, but you have to use the driver, you have to use the putter, you have to use the ball, you have to use our bag, you have to wear a hat. And they kind of handcuff you into using equipment. So, like, there's a company out there now that I heard this year that they're trying to cut back on players, and you have to use the ball. And a lot of people don't want to use the ball. Like, Titleist is very well known for having the most used golf ball. But there's other companies that are like, what, if you want a 14 club deal, you have to use our ball and you have to use that. So, and the money on the Korn Ferry Tour, honestly, is really quite, it's a nothing burger. So, my advice for people to get their card out there would be like, hey, use whatever you want, because one good week with what you're using is better than, what you're going to get paid, even upfront from an equipment company for the equipment. And changing. I've seen so many guys do it. Like, they change driver on Tuesday afternoon of a tournament week, which I think is crazy, because you use something that you know what you're using, and it's like, why would you use a brand new driver a day before the tournament? Or same with irons. Wedges, obviously we change wedges and we know what that's going to do. It's just going to be a bit more spin. But changing equipment, I would say do it in a controlled environment. Do it as realistic as you can in regards to like what ball you're using, the weather conditions. But on the Korn Ferry Tour, like I said, the equipment companies want you to use all their stuff. They're trying to get in. They're a business. They market, Titleist #1 ball in golf. Well, they know on the first tee what ball you're using. Odyssey obviously want to win the putter count. So Odyssey, are really big into their putters, and you've got different companies that are pushing different products. I mean, TaylorMade there for a while was really pushing their driver in 2017, 2018. They were pushing their driver, so they were paying guys pretty well just to use the driver. You know, and they still do it now on the PGA Tour. But yeah, I'd say ultimately you got to use what's good for you. Don't let the dollar signs get in the way of, like, don't use something that you don't really love because you're going to get a little bit of money for it.
Absolutely. And I think on the Korn Ferry can be especially tempting because the money isn't like, the purses aren't crazy good, but in the like contracts for the equipment, it generally, from what I've seen, isn't like crazy money, but it's honestly pretty solid. Like if you have just a reasonable equipment contract from average Joe manufacturer for X, Y, or Z, like you could get enough to pay for your tournament expenses every week. So then everything you make on top of that is essentially like free money, which can be nice, but also, as you said right there, it can also handcuff you and impede your performance for sure. Jumping from that, you know, we talked about what you've seen out there and what you've learned. You said in 2021 you lost status, and then kind of here we are. Tell us what here we are is for you, what you kind of see your future being going forward, and what you've learned through it all.
That's a really good question. So I'm 39, turning 40 this year. There's probably nothing more I would love to do than, you know, keep playing golf. You know, and playing golf means like playing on the PGA Tour or, you know, having a crack at the Korn Ferry Tour again. But realistically, I'm enjoying being home a little more. I'm enjoying being a bigger part of my son's life and my wife, and I've kind of realized as well, I've probably got a lot of other skill sets that I've acquired from playing golf and the people I've met. So my immediate thing for the future is looking, what does my future look like in the business world, and what can I do that's where I'm going to be putting my energy and time, because I know that in years to come, that's what's, you know, I'm not going to be playing golf forever. I still love it and enjoy it, and I want to do it. But, you know, it's very possible to be in your 40s and be a top 500 golfer in the world and have no money. And that's what I'm probably shit scared of the most. So my priorities are having some other business interests that I can pursue and have a bit of a legacy. So when I do want to step back from golf, I'm not starting from zero. You know, I've been fortunate. You know, I've met some great friends and people and got some good opportunities to pursue. So I'm hoping that I can do that. And then when I do play golf, I'm not 100% reliant on that week or that cut to pay for my, you know, mortgage or whatever it is, you know, like being able to go out and just go back to enjoying playing the golf but not have the pressure of, okay, this is the only sole source of my income this year. You know, and it sucks because obviously I'd love to sit here and tell you like, hey, I'm going to keep grinding away and I want to get back out in the Korn Ferry Tour. I want to do every month, you know, which I do. But realistically, I've got to think about, I've got a family and I've got bills and I've got certain things. So I've got to try to, in the short term, put my energy into what my future looks like. And then I'd love nothing more to, you know, I'm still as good and just as good as what I was, and I'd love the opportunity to get into an event and do something great or have some good finishes and maybe be able to take some pressure off and do that. But even if I did do that, I still want to be able to do some other things business-wise where I can, when I'm not playing golf, I have another revenue stream and something that I can put my time and energy into and, you know, hopefully change a few lives and pass on some of the knowledge and stuff that I've learned to others.
Absolutely. I completely understand that, especially, you know, taking that pressure off of you. Like, pressure sometimes a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but when you have a little bit of financial stability, everything else in life seems a little bit easier because you have to worry a little bit less. It's like when kids talk about, you know, going to college, like they play junior golf And if they don't have an offer anywhere, anything like that, it can feel stressful because like every time they're going out, they're going to have to perform for somebody for something. Once they get that offer, a lot of them we've talked to have said, hey, it's like a weight off my back. I was like, okay, now I can just go play. And in this case, it's way bigger than that in the sense that you got a kid and a wife and a family to take care of. It's not just the status of a college offer or where you're going to go to school. It's not that uncertainty. It's even bigger. So I completely get that. And I think that's a unique story, and we've really enjoyed talking to you about it. And it's kind of to get to the end here. Like the last question that we ask all of our guests is, if you could go back to yourself as a junior golfer and tell yourself just one thing, what would that one thing be?
Man, that's a good question. I would just say that you can do it. Biggest thing I've learned is, you grow up watching everybody on TV and admiring them and thinking how good they are, but you probably don't give yourself enough credit sometimes for how good you are. So the biggest thing I think if I could just go back, it would just be like, I know that I know, like, know that you can do it. Like some people think they can do it, but they don't know they can do it, if that makes sense. So that'd probably be the biggest thing. I mean, is just go, hey, these guys aren't any better than me and I can go do it. But, as you go on in your career too, some things affect people different ways. But a young college kid coming out, they're just ready to just, go out there and tear it up. So yeah, I would just say, you can do it. If you want it, you can do it.
Perfect. Well, we appreciate you joining us. If people are trying to find you on social media, reach out to you, where can they find you at to ask you more questions?
Really, the only thing I have is my website. I'm not on social. One thing I didn't do is social media, just because for multiple reasons, but just traveling and being away for 30-something weeks a year, I was like, I'm not going to sit on my phone and in a hotel room. I was always trying to do different stuff and go see stuff in the towns we're in and, try to play a little guitar and different things like that. So I'm not on social media just because all my friends I keep in touch with on the phone and they keep in touch with me that way. So I'm probably a little backward that way, but I do have a website that I kind of kept all my sponsors and friends and people that I met along the way follow me, which was like jamiearnoldgolf.com. So that was really the only avenue where people kind of reached out. And if, obviously if we were friends, they'd call me and let me know what's up.
Perfect. Be sure to go to Jamie's website. I think he keeps it updated some. Check out at least a little bit more about him, and then you can reach him through there. And then if you're listening just on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. This is going to help us get our message out to more people. And if you're trying to find us on social media, we do have that. So you can find us on Twitter at Tournament Code and on Instagram at The Tournament Code. As always, we appreciate you taking the time to join us, and we look forward to diving in deeper to what it takes to play elite tournament golf.